Daughter-in-law laughed, "You'll die poor." I walked out, and left them homeless. When Desmond and Brian asked if I wanted to live closer to them, I said yes. Of course I did. They were starting a family, and I thought, perhaps foolishly, that being nearby meant I'd be part of something again. They helped me find a modest rental near their new home. I sold my old place and moved. Brian even picked out the curtains for me. "It's better for you here," she said. It was peaceful, mostly quiet. But now and then, there were small things, Desmond forgetting to invite me to dinner. Brian asking if I could keep the kids for just a few hours but never staying to talk afterward. A glance, once, from her, when I asked about joining them for a school function, that lingered too long on my shoes, then my cardigan, before settling into a tight smile. I never pushed. I told myself it was the adjustment, the stress of parenting, the blur of modern life. I baked my pear tart for the twins' birthday and brought it over with matching hats. They thanked me, but the cake Brian made went untouched beside mine, and when they posted photos online, mine wasn't mentioned. Just celebrating with our little circle. That night, I washed the cake tin and placed it upside down on a towel. I sat with a cup of cold tea and watched the dusk stretch across the hedge between our homes. From my window, I could just see the glow of their kitchen light. I had moved here to feel close. But closeness, I was learning, is not the same as belonging. I began to notice the pattern that fall. Not suddenly, but in the way mist creeps in overnight, subtle, muffling, difficult to name. There were the dinners I didn't know about until after they happened. The school recitals I heard about from the neighbor's boy, not from my own son. Once, I saw Brian loading the car with cupcakes and paper streamers, the twins giggling in the back seat. When I stepped outside to wave, she paused only a moment, then lifted her hand in a polite arc. No invitation followed. I stayed on the porch a while after they pulled out of the driveway, the sun catching on the corner of the porch swing where Desmond had sat once, years ago, fixing the hinge for me after Mark died. I still remember the way his fingers turned black with grease and how he rubbed them absently on his jeans, grinning. "You're safe now, Mom," he'd said. "No more squeaky swings." And I believed him. The swing squeaked again that morning. I didn't tell him. I started walking in the mornings, down to the small park near the elementary school. Leaves crisped and fell, leaving behind the dry scent of coming winter. Sometimes, I passed Brian on her morning jog, earbuds in, gaze fixed ahead. If she noticed me, she didn't show it. Once, I raised my hand in greeting. She nodded without slowing down. Inside my house, everything stayed neat. The coffee table remained dusted. The mail sorted. My coat hung carefully on the hook beside the door. But the silence began to settle in like smoke, thin at first, then thick and hard to breathe around. One Thursday, I left a note in their mailbox. "Would love to have the twins over for cocoa and books this weekend. Let me know what works." It was never answered. Saturday came. I made cocoa anyway. Cut the crusts off the little sandwiches the way they liked. Set out the storybooks on the low table. At noon, I checked the window. No one came. By 2, I poured the cocoa down the drain and folded the napkins away. The books stayed where they were for 3 days. That Monday, Desmond called. His voice was light. Distracted. "Hey, Mom, just checking in. Things are nuts over here. We should do something soon." I asked him if he'd seen the note. He paused. "Oh, that. Yeah, sorry. Meant to call you back. We've just had a lot going on." I heard laughter in the background. Brian's voice, rising sharp and cheerful. I said nothing. He said he'd talk to me soon. He didn't. The twins still waved when they saw me, but always from behind glass or across a lawn. Never close enough to talk. Never with that spark they once had when I arrived with my tote bag of treats and library books. One afternoon, I walked to the bakery on Elm Street and bought lemon bars, the kind Desmond used to ask for on his birthday. I wrapped them in wax paper and placed them in a tin with a ribbon. Then I walked to their door. I knocked once. Brian opened it halfway, the sound of a blender roaring from inside. She smiled, eyes tired. "Oh, Sylvia. Hi. I brought something sweet," I said, holding out the tin. She hesitated, then took it. "That's lovely. Thank you. We've been watching our sugar, though. I thought maybe the twins." "We'll see," she said quickly, already stepping back. "We're just about to head out." I nodded and stepped down. She didn't close the door behind me right away. Just stood there, waiting, as though holding the space until I disappeared. That night, I didn't bake. I didn't sweep the front walk. I turned on the TV and muted it. I watched the flicker of strangers' lives fill my darkened living room. When the weekend came, I drove to the lake. Just to sit. The trees were bare now, and the wind made the water look older somehow. Less like a place for summer picnics and more like a mirror, flat, cold, unforgiving. I sat on the same benchmark and I used to favor. The one with initials carved into the armrest. Some young couple, long gone. I traced the grooves with my thumb. I didn't cry. But I felt the ache rise in my chest like a tide. Back at home, a voicemail blinked on my phone. It was Brian. She said they were sorry. That things were hectic. That they appreciated all I did. That maybe next weekend, we could plan something small. I replayed it twice. Then I deleted it. The next morning, I took down the framed photos in my hallway. Not all of them, just the ones from recent years. The posed smiles, the matching sweaters, the holidays where I stood slightly off to the side. I wrapped them in tissue and placed them in a box in the closet. The walls looked bare after that. But not empty. The quiet changed after that. Not louder, just deeper. Like something had shifted in the floorboards beneath me. I began to feel it when I washed dishes, when I folded the bath towels, when I passed the corner where I used to keep the toy basket. I had moved it to the attic after it sat untouched for months. I didn't hear from Desmond for almost 3 weeks. When he did call, it was about mail. A package meant for them had been delivered to my house by mistake. Could he swing by and pick it up? I said yes, of course. I always said yes. I set the box on the hall table. Wiped it with a cloth. It was light, probably something for the children. I didn't peek. When he arrived, it was dark already. He knocked lightly, like a neighbor. I opened the door and smiled the way you do when you're trying not to let your face betray anything. "Thanks, Mom," he said, lifting the box. Brian said it was something for the school fundraiser. He didn't ask to come in. He didn't take off his coat. I nodded, and we stood like that for a moment, two people who once lived inside the same life, now orbiting separate moons. "How are the kids?" I asked gently. He smiled faintly. "Busy. Growing fast. You know." I nodded again. He hesitated, then added, "Brian's been meaning to call. Things have just been, you know." "I know," I said. And I did. After he left, I turned off all the lights except the one in the kitchen and made myself a cup of tea I didn't really want. I stood by the sink, holding the warm mug, watching the glow of their porch light in the distance. Sometimes I wondered if they saw mine from their side. In early December, I received a Christmas card from a woman I used to see at the library, back when I still volunteered in the children's section. Inside was a short note, written in looping cursive. "Thinking of you this season. Hope you're keeping warm." I held it longer than necessary. The warmth of it was different than anything I'd received from Desmond or Brian all year. I set it on the windowsill. That week, I decorated the house by myself. I brought down the same box of ornaments from the garage, each wrapped in tissue, each carrying a memory. Desmond's popsicle stick reindeer. The bell from our first tree as a couple. A little wooden angel missing her left wing. I didn't send out invitations. I didn't expect company. Instead, I baked cranberry scones and gave them to the mailman. Left a box on the porch for the sanitation workers. I wrapped a few things for the neighbors I still spoke to: hand cream, small soaps, ribboned boxes of tea. For Desmond and the family, I wrapped nothing. Not out of spite. Just out of clarity. Christmas morning came quiet. I sat in my robe, a soft blanket around my shoulders, the radio playing faint carols in the background. I watched the snow fall with a kind of stillness I hadn't felt in years. At noon, the phone rang. Desmond. "Merry Christmas, Mom," he said. "The kids opened their gifts this morning. They loved them. I hadn't sent any." I said, "That's wonderful." Brian's voice chimed faintly in the background, then quieted. Desmond cleared his throat. "We're keeping it low-key this year. Just us." "Sounds nice," I said. He paused, maybe expecting me to ask if I could stop by. Maybe hoping I wouldn't. I didn't. We ended the call soon after. I washed the breakfast dishes and wiped the counter clean, then sat at the kitchen table with a pad of paper and a pen. I wrote a letter. Nothing dramatic. Just a few lines. "Desmond. You once told me that family is the people who show up. I'm starting to understand what you meant. Love. Mom." I didn't send it. I folded it neatly, slipped it into an envelope, and placed it in the drawer where I keep things too true to throw away. January passed. Then February. I kept to my routines. Groceries on Tuesdays. Calls with my sister on Sunday evenings. Sometimes I saw the twins from a distance, bouncing in the snow with plastic shovels. They never looked my way. I stopped walking by the school. Stopped looking for the glow of their porch light. In March, the rental lease came up for renewal. I stood in the kitchen with the envelope in my hand, weighing it. Not the cost. The choice. I renewed for 6 months. Not because I planned to stay. But because it gave me time to plan how to leave. Spring came late that year, dragging its heels behind gray skies and thawing sidewalks. The tulips out front rose hesitantly, too few, too thin. I didn't fuss with them. Let them bloom or don't, I thought. It made no difference now. I stopped baking entirely. The kitchen stayed clean, the oven cool. There were no birthdays marked on my calendar this time. The twins were turning 9. I knew the date. I did nothing. A week after their birthday, I received a card in the mail. A photo of them, grinning and frosting-faced, beneath balloons in shades of gold and navy. A typed message inside: "We missed you." No signature. Not even Desmond's handwriting. I left it unopened on the windowsill, beside the library woman's Christmas card. The only thing I still dusted. That Sunday, Brian came by. Unannounced. I heard her heels before I saw her, a sharp, rhythmic click up the walkway, followed by the polite knock of someone who expects to be let in. I opened the door and stood back. She smiled, tight. "I was in the area," she said. "Thought I'd drop in." I said nothing. Just opened the door wider. She stepped in like she used to, like she belonged here. Her coat was expensive, her perfume faint. She looked around as though assessing for changes. Nothing had changed, not really. "I brought lemon squares," she added, holding out a foil-covered plate. "I know you used to make them. Thought I'd return the favor." I took them and set them on the counter without comment. Brian sat. Crossed her legs. Smiled again. "I know things have been distant," she began. "Desmond worries about you." I nodded once. "And the kids," she went on, "they ask about you sometimes." "Do they?" I said. She blinked. "Of course. They love their grandma." I glanced at the plate of lemon squares. "You know," I said quietly, "I don't think they know me well enough to love me." She didn't respond right away. We've just been overwhelmed, she said finally. Work, school, everything. I waited. We're trying to find balance, she added. And we thought, maybe we could start fresh. Come by for dinner next weekend. I looked at her then. Really looked. There was no warmth in the offer. No reaching out. Just a performance, delivered the way you'd read lines from a teleprompter. I said, no thank you. She blinked. Excuse me? I won't come, I said. But I hope you enjoy yourselves. The pause after that was heavy. Well, she said at last, standing. That's your choice. Yes, I said. It is. She left without the lemon squares. I didn't watch her go. That night, I wrote Desmond a letter. Dear Desmond. I know you think silence is kindness. But it's not. It's just another way of leaving someone behind. I won't fight you. I won't plead to be let back in. But I won't stay where I'm not seen. Mom. I placed it in an envelope but didn't mail it. Just slipped it beside the first one in the drawer. The next morning, I called the rental office and asked about breaking the lease early. The woman on the phone said there would be a fee. I said that was fine. I'm just looking for something different, I told her. And I was. In April, I packed slowly. Box by box. Not because there was much to take, but because each item had to be weighed, emotionally, not practically. What stayed? What didn't? The toy basket went to the donation center. The framed photos remained wrapped in their tissue. I donated half my dishes and all of Desmond's old school trophies, still tucked in a trunk. I kept the kettle. The quilt. A small bag of spices. My late husband's coat. I didn't tell anyone I was leaving. I didn't leave a forwarding address. When the moving truck came, it was early. The driver didn't ask questions. Just loaded the boxes with quiet efficiency. By noon, the house was empty. Before I locked up, I walked through the rooms one last time. The dent in the wall where Desmond once kicked a ball. The scratch on the window frame from the twins' tricycle. The faint outline of the bookshelf that had held my recipes and old Christmas cards. All still there. All fading. I placed the lemon squares, now hard and stale, on the counter. Left the envelope with the lease termination on top. Then I shut the door behind me. The truck pulled away. I didn't look back. The new place was smaller, older, kinder. A flat on the edge of a different town, above a florist. The woman downstairs was named Lillian. She gave me a free bouquet my first day there, said it was to welcome you back to the land of color. I didn't know what she meant then. But I do now. The walls of the new flat were yellow. Not bright yellow, faded, warm, the color of late afternoons. The kind of yellow that didn't ask for attention but welcomed it anyway. Lillian, the florist downstairs, had eyes like slate and hands always dusted in pollen. She reminded me of a teacher I once had, gentle but firm, never needing to raise her voice. She gave me the bouquet on my second morning there, not the first. The first day is for landing, she said. The second is for breathing. I hadn't breathed in years. Not properly. There was no porch swing here. No hedges to trim. No toy baskets to store. The windows faced a quiet alley and the back of a bakery that started its ovens at 4 each morning. The smell of rising bread replaced the silence I used to wake to. I bought a small table for the kitchen, just big enough for one. I folded the quilt over the arm of the worn sofa and stacked 3 books beside the bed, ones I had read before but couldn't quite remember. I didn't tell Desmond where I had gone. Not because I was angry, but because the decision to disappear had become something sacred. Not an escape. Not even a protest. Just a closing of the door that should have closed long ago. The first letter came 2 weeks later. It was forwarded from the old address, written in Desmond's rounded print. No return address. Mom, it read, we came by and the house was empty. Where are you? Are you okay? Please let us know. The kids miss you. I stared at the words. Not because they surprised me, but because they didn't. It had always taken absence to make me visible. I folded the letter neatly and slid it into the drawer beside the others. Still unopened. I started volunteering again. At a small community center 3 blocks from the flat. I shelved books, sorted canned goods, helped an older man named Leo scan his insurance forms. No one there knew I was a mother. No one asked why I sometimes flinched at sudden kindness. On Tuesdays, I had coffee with Lillian before she opened the shop. She made it strong and black and didn't sweeten it, even for guests. We sat in mismatched chairs by the register and talked about weather and gardening and how terrible the town council was at fixing potholes. One morning she asked me, "You got any family nearby?" I said, "Not anymore." She didn't press. She just nodded and poured another inch of coffee into my cup. That was enough. In June, another letter arrived. This one from Brian. The handwriting was neater. The tone more composed. "Hi Sylvia, we're hoping you'll reconsider a visit. The twins are asking more questions. Desmond is worried. We just want to talk. No apology. No admission. Just a request for presents, now that absence had become inconvenient." I didn't reply. Instead, I went to the thrift store and bought a second set of plates. Blue porcelain with hairline cracks. The kind that wouldn't match anything in their home. I set them out on the table that night, one for me, one for nobody. I poured tea into both cups. I sat in the quiet and sipped. The second cup went cold. Summer arrived slowly, the heat trailing in like a hesitant guest. The windows stayed open. Bees drifted in, lazy and harmless. The smell of Lillian's marigolds mixed with yeast from the bakery. I felt older. But not weaker. One morning, I opened the drawer and reread the letters. I did not weep. I did not miss anyone. What I missed, if anything, was the idea of being missed. There's a difference. A package came in July. No note. No return address. Just a small box with a child's drawing inside, crayons on thick paper. It showed a stick figure holding hands with 2 smaller stick figures beneath a crooked sun. On the bottom, in shaky letters, "We love you, Grandma." It wasn't signed. I kept it. Not because it meant reconciliation. But because it was the first thing sent without strings. I taped the drawing to the inside of the pantry door. Not out on the wall, just where I could see it when I reached for the tea. Something private. Something between memory and the faint ache of maybe. By late July, the bakery girls downstairs knew my name. They called me Miss Sylvia, even though I told them not to fuss. They started saving me the last cinnamon twist each Friday. I never asked them to. That was why it meant something. I spent more time outside in the evenings. There was a bench across the street, half shaded by a crooked elm. It wasn't pretty, but it gave me a view of the alley, the florist, the light that stayed on above Lillian's counter well past closing. She worked late, always. Arranging things, wiping stems, preparing for the morning. We waved sometimes. One evening, she crossed the street with 2 mugs of tea. No explanation. Just sat beside me and handed me one. "You look like someone who used to be needed," she said. I didn't reply. But the words settled somewhere in my chest like a stone in warm water. I began walking further each day, past the post office, down the lane where the old houses leaned toward each other like gossiping widows. I found a bench behind the library where no one ever sat. I brought my books there. I read slowly, not for escape, but for the rhythm. One morning, I read the same paragraph 4 times before closing the book. Because my mind had wandered. Not to Desmond. Not to the twins. To the sound of my own breath. It had been years since I heard it that clearly. In August, a phone call came. A number I didn't recognize. I let it ring twice. then picked up. Mom? It was Desmond. I said nothing. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, he continued, but I'm worried. I still said nothing. Brian told me about the letter you sent, he added. I hadn't sent one. She said it was short. Just said you wouldn't come. Ah. That. He hesitated. I miss you. I didn't say I missed him too. Because I wasn't sure I did. He went on. The twins keep asking questions. They think it's their fault. That stung. I cleared my throat. It's not their fault, I said. A long pause. Could we? I mean, if you're willing, could we meet? Just us? Why now? I asked. Another silence. Because I think I forgot how to be your son. That caught me. I looked out the window. The sun was slicing through the trees like old lace. Where? I asked. The cafe on Monroe. Sunday. Noon? All right. That Sunday, I wore a soft blouse and slacks. No lipstick. Just earrings I hadn't touched in years. I walked slowly. The cafe was small, bright. I chose a corner table. Ordered nothing. Desmond arrived late. A little thinner. Tired around the eyes. He sat without speaking. When he finally looked at me, his expression shifted. You look good, he said. I nodded. So do you. We sat in silence for a while. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a paper. A drawing. The same one. The twins wanted to send this, he said. Brian didn't know. I received it, I replied. Weeks ago. His eyes widened. Then, you've been getting our things? Just the ones worth opening. He flinched a little. Then laughed. Not cruelly, just sadly. I deserve that, he said. I folded my hands. Why did you stop inviting me, Desmond? He looked down. I think we started confusing comfort with control. I think Brian. We didn't want to feel guilty anymore. So you erased me. He nodded. I let the silence stretch. He looked up. I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't know how far gone things were until the house was empty. I left quietly, I said. You always did. We didn't talk long after that. He offered to walk me home. I declined. Before we parted, he said, if the kids write again, would you write back? I might, I said. If it's really from them. And then I walked home. Alone. But not unhappy. The following week passed without noise. No letters. No calls. Just the low hum of ceiling fans, the clink of teaspoons, the creak of floors that had held me without judgment. It was a good silence, one I had chosen. I still went to the bench across from the florist. Still watched the alley, the bakery, the curl of petals on Lillian's display cart. One afternoon, she handed me a bundle of lavender and said, for sleep. I didn't tell her I'd already been sleeping better than I had in years. On Thursday, a new letter arrived. This one was different, thicker paper, hand-folded. Inside was a note, written in blue crayon. Dear Grandma, I drew you again. Mommy said we can send this just from us. Please write back if you want to. Love, Ava and Miles. Enclosed was a new drawing. This time, the figures were more detailed. There was a bench, and a woman reading a book. The sun had a smiling face. I turned the page over. A small line in Ava's handwriting, we didn't show Mommy. I held the paper in both hands. I did not cry. I took out my pen and a small note card I kept for grocery lists. Dear Ava and Miles, I wrote. Thank you for your beautiful picture. It made me smile. I sit on a bench like that most days. I'm glad you remember. Love, Grandma. I placed it in an envelope and walked it to the small mailbox at the end of the lane. I told no one. On Saturday morning, Lillian knocked. A rare thing. She held a bundle of tulips, white, fresh, slightly damp. "You look like you could use something hopeful," she said. "I didn't think tulips were in season," I replied. She smiled. Neither did they. I placed them in an old jar and set them on the kitchen windowsill. Every morning after, I watched them lean toward the light, slow and certain. Another letter arrived 10 days later. Ava again. "Grandma, we're doing a school play. It's about bees. I get to be the queen bee. Miles is a flower. No mention of Desmond. None of Brian. Just dates, names, crayon illustrations." I wrote back, "I'd love to see the play. But I think it's best if I watch from the back." She answered, "That's okay. I'll buzz louder so you can hear me." I smiled. By mid-September, the season turned. Nights cooled. The smell of autumn crept in: smoke, leaves, bread. Desmond wrote once more. No return address. Just one page. "I don't expect forgiveness," it said. "But I want you to know I've changed my power of attorney. I put the kids' savings into a trust with your name. Not because I expect anything. Just because I realized I'd rather protect something than inherit it." He didn't ask for a response. I didn't send one. I just folded the letter and placed it behind the others. One morning, I sat at my usual bench with a new book and a thermos of tea. A soft voice called from behind. "Are you the lady with the bench?" I turned. Ava stood there, in a yellow jacket, her backpack tilted sideways. I blinked. "How did you find me?" "Daddy brought me. He's over there." She pointed to a car across the street. I saw Desmond, watching, not moving. Ava stepped forward. She held something behind her back. "We made this in class." She pulled out a small plant, sunflowers in a plastic cup, with a paper tag that said, "To someone who gives light." I took it gently. "Thank you," I said. She leaned in, hugged me quickly, and then skipped back to the car. Desmond nodded once. Then drove away. That night, I repotted the sunflower into a clay pot on the windowsill. It was too small to bloom properly. But it stretched, anyway. Like hope. Like me. October arrived with quiet rains and darker mornings. I didn't mind the gray. I welcomed it, actually, it felt honest. Like the sky had finally decided to stop pretending. The sunflower began to wilt a little. I moved it to the warmer sill, watered it gently. Some things hold on longer than you'd expect. Others don't. The last letter came on a Monday. Ava again. Blue ink this time. The handwriting was neater. "Grandma, Daddy says we might visit you. Not right away. Just when it's okay. He says we'll wait until you say it's okay." She'd drawn a house this time, smaller than before. Just one window. One chimney. A path leading up to the door. I placed the letter in the drawer but didn't answer. Not yet. At the community center, Leo asked if I'd help with the holiday coat drive. I said yes before I even thought about it. It felt good to say yes again. On my terms. The days grew colder. I pulled out the thicker scarves, the soft gloves I'd tucked away years ago. I wrapped them around myself with a kind of quiet satisfaction. For warmth, yes. But also for the comfort of choosing. One morning, I found an envelope at my door. No postage. Just slipped under. Inside was a photograph: Ava and Miles in bee costumes. Both smiling. On the back, in Desmond's handwriting, "She really did buzz louder." I stood at the sink holding that photograph until the kettle whistled. Then I tucked it behind the sugar jar. By mid-November, the florist closed early each day. Lillian said her knees ached too much in the cold. She still saved me lilies on Thursdays. They're stubborn, she said once. They bloom even when they shouldn't. That night, I wrote a short note. Dear Ava and Miles. I miss you too. Grandma. I sealed it, walked it to the mailbox in the dark. No lights on the street. No stars. Just the sound of my footsteps and the feel of the envelope in my palm. The next weekend, I heard voices outside my window. Soft laughter. Footsteps. I peered through the curtain. Desmond and Ava. No car. Just a walk. They didn't knock. They stood on the sidewalk for a moment, as if waiting for a sign, then turned and walked away again. I didn't open the door. But I didn't look away either. The sunflower died before the first snow. Its stem sagged. The last leaf curled in on itself like a closing hand. I didn't throw it out right away. I left it on the sill another week. Because some things deserve a long goodbye. On Christmas Eve, I lit a single candle. No tree. No music. Just the warmth of the flame and the soft tick of the kitchen clock. I made hot chocolate the way I used to, dark, not too sweet. I drank 1 cup slowly. Then I poured the second cup. Set it across from me at the table. And left it there. Not because I expected company. But because the act of waiting had become its own form of grace. The snow stayed longer than usual that winter. Not deep, just steady, enough to coat the pavement in quiet, to muffle footsteps, to soften everything it touched. I watched it from the window each morning, steam rising from my cup, the house around me still and undemanding. Desmond didn't write again. Neither did Ava. There was no anger in their silence this time. Just space. I needed it. So I kept my days simple. I read more, cooked less. I began to walk earlier, while the streets were still gray and empty, when the bakery ovens first stirred and the city felt untouched. Sometimes I saw children on their way to school, bright jackets, skipping steps. None were mine. That was okay. The coat drive went well. We filled 2 bins and half a closet. On the last day, Leo gave me a wrapped tin of brittle toffee. I thanked him, opened it later that night, and ate 2 pieces in bed while reading a mystery novel I'd borrowed without checking the title. Sweet, brittle, forgettable. Like most things, eventually. Mid-January, Lillian got sick. Just the flu, she said. But she let me watch the shop for a week. Just water them and don't rearrange the succulents, she warned. I opened the door at 9 each morning, turned the sign, and breathed in the green air of her workroom. The smell of soil, petals, warm glass. I kept the cash box near the register and only forgot to give one person their change. That week, I felt useful again, but differently than before. Not for someone's family, not in exchange for space at someone else's table. Just useful. Like a neighbor. Like a person. When she returned, she handed me a pot of orchids. They're fussy, she said, but so are you. I laughed. I took them home. February passed. I didn't write. I didn't wait. One afternoon, I was sitting on the bench behind the library, gloves in my lap, sun on my face. It was warm for winter. I almost forgot the season. A voice came from behind. Familiar, hesitant. Is this seat taken? I turned. Desmond. Older. Paler. A little thinner. His coat had a small tear near the hem. He noticed me looking at it. I caught it on a fence, he said, softly. Didn't notice until later. I didn't move. He sat beside me. We watched a squirrel scramble up a tree. He didn't speak for a long time. Then finally, I'd been trying to figure out how to say this. You're here, I said. He looked at me. Really looked. I was cruel, he said. Not loud. Just, consistently cruel. By forgetting. By leaving you out. I said nothing. And I was a coward, he added. I let comfort decide what I could look away from. Still, I said nothing. He pulled something from his pocket. It was a photograph. Not the bee costume one. A different one. A much younger me, sitting on a picnic blanket, Desmond maybe 10, asleep against my side. I found this when we were clearing out the attic, he said. I don't even remember that day. But you look peaceful. I remembered the day. I remembered the sound of wind in the trees. The way he refused to nap until he'd run himself dizzy. You were sunburned, I said. I made you wear socks on your hands. He laughed. I remember that part. We sat in silence again. Then he folded the photo and placed it gently on the bench between us. You don't have to forgive me, he said. But if there's room in your life for something less broken, I'd like to try. I didn't pick up the photo. But I didn't leave it behind either. That night, I made soup for one. I set out one bowl, one spoon. But when I closed the pantry door, I caught a glimpse of Ava's drawing. It had started to curl at the edges. I smoothed it flat. Spring returned in small ways. The tree outside my window budded too early, as if eager to escape the weight of its bare limbs. The bakery began setting chairs outside again, 2 at a time. Lillian brought home daffodils before the soil had even thawed, their stems clumsily bandaged in twine. Everything seemed to be trying again. So I did too. I sent a letter, not a long one, just enough. Dear Ava and Miles, I would love to hear your buzzing again sometime. Love, Grandma. It wasn't a bridge. Just a light. Left on. Quietly. Desmond called on a Sunday in May. Asked if he could visit, just him, no pressure. I said yes. I didn't clean. I didn't bake. I opened the door when he knocked, and we sat at my kitchen table with tea and silence. He didn't apologize again. He didn't offer explanations. He just told me about the twins. Their favorite books. How Ava had started drawing bees in the corners of every homework page. I listened. That was enough. When he stood to leave, he looked around the flat for the first time, at the yellow walls, the worn rug, the folded quilt on the chair. It suits you, he said. It's quiet, I replied. He nodded. Before he stepped out, he placed something on the table. The photograph. The picnic. Me in the sunlight, one hand resting on his shoulder. Keep it, he said. Or not. Just. I didn't want it to disappear. After he left, I didn't move it for a long time. Eventually, I placed it inside the pantry door, beside Ava's drawing. Not to hide it. Just to keep it near. Weeks passed. The sunflower never grew back. But a new stem appeared in its place, something unmarked, something slow. One afternoon, I caught myself humming while sweeping the porch. The sound startled me. I couldn't remember the last time I'd heard it. Ava and Miles visited in July. They stood in the doorway like guests, too polite, too careful. I knelt down, slowly, stiff with age, and opened my arms. Neither hesitated. We didn't talk about absence. We talked about bees. And benches. And how the sky looked different depending on which street you stood on. When they left, they each gave me a drawing. This time, the house had 2 windows. One had a lamp in it. The other had a bee. That night, I lit a candle. Not for ceremony. Just because I wanted to. The apartment was quiet. The clock ticked softly in the kitchen. My teacup sat half full beside a folded napkin. I stood at the window and watched the street below. Lillian had closed early. The bench across the way was empty. Still, I placed 2 cups on the table. Mine. And another. Not because I was waiting. But because I no longer needed to be alone to be whole. And that, finally, felt like belonging.